Okay, if everyone could please take their seats. I think we're getting ready to start with the afternoon program on the last day, and it's been a fantastic conference so far. The next set of presentations we're going to show have presenters from a couple of awards, and the first award that I will present is the ACADIA Society Award for Leadership. As many of you know, ACADIA is a volunteer organization. The conference, the activities that ACADIA undertakes, all the publications, all happen because so many individuals give their time, their energy, their ideas, and efforts to this organization. And many of these individuals often work in the background and in countless ways really contribute to making ACADIA better. The Society Award for Leadership recognizes the extraordinary contributions and service to the ACADIA community. And past recipients include Chuck Eastman, Branko Kolarevic, Nancy Chang, Mahesh Das, Brian Johnson, and Thomas Seebohm. And I'm very happy to recognize this year's recipient, Bob Martens. Bob Martens holds a Master of Science in Building Science from Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands, and a Doctor of Science from Vienna University of Technology. And he also now teaches as an associate professor at the Vienna University of Technology, where he teaches spatial simulation and computer-aided architectural design. Bob Martens has been involved in review activities for all of the worldwide CAD associations, so not only ACADIA, but also many of our sister organizations. And he has published over 140 conference and journal papers. His research interests are not limited to architectural design, but encompass knowledge management and electronic publishing. And he was president of ACADIA from 1997 to 2001. And after that, he's continued to serve as a member of the executive committee. And many of you were at the ACADIA conference just recently in Rome, and which I heard many great things about. But despite all of these amazing achievements, the reason why the awards committee chose Bob to recognize Bob with the Leadership Award is because of his work on the CumanCAD database. And while Bob will talk a bit more in detail, CumanCAD stands for the Cumulative Index of Papers on CAD. And it was a database created over 2 decades ago by Bob Martens and Ziga Turk. And it was intended to be a digital library of scientific papers from all of the CAD associations. And so it includes not only ACADIA, but ACADIA, CADRIA, SIGRADI, as well as journals such as IJAC. And so the reason why you can now just go to the conference website and click on the paper and have the PDF load, you'll notice that the address is the CumanCAD location of that paper. And that's because prior to the conference, because we had such amazing organization by the conference chairs, they actually had uploaded all of the paper PDFs to Bob, who got them up on CumanCAD prior to the conference. And this database is invaluable for keeping all of this amazing research that our community undertakes in one easily searchable place. And for the past couple of years, CumanCAD has also now been open access, and that means all of our students and other members who are members of the community who may not be members of ACADIA or the other organizations can have access freely to this research and knowledge, which is a really important step in making this kind of knowledge public and accessible. And so, Bob, on behalf of the ACADIA community, I am happy to present you with the ACADIA 2017 Society Award for Leadership.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here and feel very, very much honored. Indeed, we had in Europe our conference last month, and I met on this occasion Taihiko Nagakura. We are also meeting during this conference, and not enough with that, we will be meeting next week in Vienna because there's a conference on digital heritage. a short overview. I thought it might be of interest to give you a bit of background information on the work which I've been doing. The core part is, however, knowledge and knowledge management. And at the very end, where are we standing and where might this all be heading towards? My professional work at the university started with full-scale lab activities, and I'm very delighted in this regard to see that there's so much going on in the area of fabrication. When we are speaking about the late 80s, the robots were existing, but not at the universities. And one of my very first tasks was to build up a full-scale laboratory, like a theatrical stage where students could work in full scale, getting in touch with limitations of time and resources. And you had to work in groups. Not everybody is a good craftsman. And for that reason, we came in touch with large size Lego brick blocks, not producing waste, fairly easy to set up and to build space in the sense of the word. So this was changing all the time. It was a bit crystal-like. The project was there for a couple of days, and what remains in the end, slides and some video taping. Is just to give you an impression on the type of things which could happen. It does not necessarily mean that students in Austria are all very good craftsmen, but we do have a relatively large number of students. So if you are working with groups, there is always a handful of people who are very well performing in this area. This is not a Photoshop image. We have been experimenting a lot with projection technology in a time where video beaming and so on was not available yet, and some tests with gravity. So the early 90s was a kind of pioneering era. Computers came in, universities and departments were equipped with labs, but very soon the necessity came up to see what others are doing. However, in the early 90s, conferences were very different from what they are nowadays. It was more or less, to a certain extent, an exchange of, well, what kind of software are you using? How do you get it? What kind of computers? Nobody would be willing to talk about this nowadays. I've been in touch with the organization of a couple of conferences, also CAD Futures in collaboration with Andy Brown, and as Kathy said in the introduction, I'm still very much engaged in ACADIA. ACADIA is an acronym for Education in Computer-Aided Design in Europe, and we have also added the R from research, because the distinction between CAD Futures and the other associations in the early days primarily had to do with the fact that there was a bit of a tendency that vendors were more or less interested to take over and to advertise and to market. And CAD Futures was the platform where research with the big R in uppercase was performed. I think that has changed a lot. However, the attractive signature of CAD Futures is still that it is moving from one continent to the other one, highly self-organized and not belonging to a certain country or region. Yeah, and every location has its specific issues. Of course, we were teaching Viennese waltz in Vienna, and quite some delegates were following us. Another track, and which has been very much into my field of attention, is virtual reconstruction work. of buildings that have been destroyed by intention. We had a very interesting keynote yesterday evening, and to a certain extent I'm a bit jealous to see what the French people are doing, because there is at least something to be recorded. The buildings we are speaking about, they are destroyed by intention, and it has to be said, especially the city of Vienna was very precise in destroying these buildings. So what is left over is some documentation, some photographs, at best eventually interior photography. And we have been working on the locations in the city of Vienna and have expanded in the past years to locations in the monarchy which have been covered by Viennese architects. And that is remarkable, because the maximum distance between Vienna and, for example, the eastern part of Poland and Galicia is roughly 1,000 kilometers. Imagine how 100 years ago people were committing to building activities. I had also a paper here at ACADIA, because if you are doing more than one piece of work in the course of time, you want to have a systematics in your model, allowing that if new materials are coming up, and that is happening nowadays. Quite some materials are digitized, they are tagged, and we are more and more finding photographs which simply were never published. And then there would be a need probably to rework once again the model, and the original creator might not be around. And then you need a clear systematics to work further. We are not, so to say, disclosing ourselves, but we have an ongoing connection with collaboration with the Jewish Museum in Vienna, and this gave us the opportunity to present the research output from nearly 2 decades to a wider audience. We were using the instrument of panoramic representations, and on the photograph on the right you can see 3 stations where iPads were installed, and people could simply navigate through the space. It's a cubic VR solution where, so to say, 6 images are created. They are melted together. They build a hotspot, and you can move around even more in an acrobatic way as you could do normally. At least I can't any longer. iPads are making this, are, so to say, serving as a good instrument, tablets to exchange on this, and it has been proven very, very useful to serve a wider audience and to create a memory of things that have been but are not any longer available. And this is, so to say, the current state of the art, very much depending on the source material. It is, you could call it digital archaeology. There's some degree of speculation in it, but if you imagine that around 1900, thousands of buildings have been built, this allows for a good chance to fill up the gaps which are there. Not very prominent situations, very often in the city fabric, just, so to say, for sure not freestanding, because having too much attention would not be a good thing. Yeah, the core topic of today is knowledge management, and if I'm writing here, conferencing, year after year after year, indeed, you can make a full-time job out of it. You can move from Rome to Boston, and from Boston then next month to Chile. There may be a short break during Christmas. You're moving further to ASCAD and in Amman and ACADIA. And when you come back at your home university, maybe your job and your work is gone. but hardly anybody is able to join all these conferences. But it is, so to say, the core part is delivered, if you wish so, in the broad sense by ACADIA, 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 and ASCAD, but there are also dedicated platforms such as the generative systems, smart geometry. We have seen robotics the day before yesterday, and that is, so to say, quite a growth and also in intensity which has been taking place in the past 10 to 15 years. In the early 80s, when ACADIA and ACADIA started their work, conferences were more like work groups, by far smaller. And in those days, the internet did not really exist, and it was not easy to maintain submissions. Nowadays, and this conference is a very good example with 300 plus participants, that is quite a lot. And if you want to organize this because time will not be extended in a good manner, you are in need of tools who are supporting you. So what I'm saying here is that very soon we will jump over the border of 200 conferences, and what remains from a conference in the end, besides, so to say, a very nice atmosphere, good talks and exchange, social events, but what is remaining is the proceedings. You have all received a USB stick, but what is going to happen with this stick? Maybe you will erase it and to put some other materials on it. I'm not sure that you will go to the library and say, I have received a USB stick, could you please archive this for me? I don't think that will happen. So what is the memory of an association? Everybody of us, depending on, so to say, the number of conferences you have been participating in, have bits and pieces of memory, but in the end, the question remains, who is able to access? And that's, so to say, the starting point where CUMIN-CAD, that's an acronym for Cumulative Index of CAD, it seems to be also in English, and cumin is a kind of seed which is very hot on top of that. And when, so to say, these considerations were made, we did not belong to the very first one. There's, for example, Doug Noble and Karen Kensing had set up, so to say, a listing which is still available on the internet, and also Yehuda Calais had started with what he called CADline. He was in touch with librarians, and they did it on a diskette in those days. But it's not a shame if you haven't heard from it, because he was simply too early on the way. This is what the index is looking like. So it's just plain text, and by way of searching, you could go through it. 1998, obviously we have seen this year already in another context. Tom Maver linked me up with Giga Turk. He was in those days one of the web geeks of Slovenia, working out all kinds of web-based applications. And we got in touch electronically. And Giga was fast. He set up an interface, and I thought, well, if he's fast, then I should be even more faster. So I started to input materials, and it became very clear that we should go for a critical mass, because if there are just a handful of papers in it, well, at best your friends and respected colleagues will take a look at it and say, well, just another prototype, very nice. But that was not the case, because very soon the associations, they started to express their interest, and this is, so to say, the historical image of the very first application. You will recognize Netscape. I don't think Netscape is still existing. Then some rework took place, but we were less focusing on the development of the interface, which should be, so to say, simple and easy. Just put in a couple of terms, your own name or the topic you are working on, and get some hits, not complicated forms and search strings. So what was the work in the beginning? Digital data was available, but the metadata, that is the title, the authors, the abstract, had to be taken out of it. And for ACADIA, when we were in touch, it turned out that there were also some proceedings which were only paper-based. And despite some efforts, no digital files could be retrieved. The materials were scanned, all authors were contacted, so over 200 emails were sent, would you be willing to make your work available? And there was just one very friendly, explicit denial. Thanks for the opportunity, but no thanks. Then the European Union supported the project in order to bring the interface to the next level. In those days, in talks with the associations, we decided to make this limited open access. That means papers younger than 2 years of publication date would only be available to members of the CAT associations. We were setting up IP ranges so that if, for example, MIT, which they did, signed up as an institutional member, their students would get access. But it was actually quite, though financially viable for the associations, quite some work to administer this. And not too long ago, the delegates from the associations came together in Newcastle and decided finally to make this open access, because this is the best reward for our authors, that you will maximize the attention to your publication. In the meanwhile, also an integration with Google Scholar took place so that the data is being fed into other systems. And last not least, that you can also access it much easier from your mobile device without, so to say, reducing and so on. Just to give you an insight on access, autumn is very strong, and it will not surprise that the number one, you can't read this, but it's the United States, then the United Kingdom, China, India, and Brazil. They are very much accessing the interface. Yeah, where are we standing as of today's? A large number of records, but a record as such would contain authorship, title, source, an abstract, but really interesting is, of course, to have the full text. And I'm happy to say that a large number of full text is available. And if you would say that a paper has had an average 10 pages or so, it means that it would take quite some time to get this read. Yeah, the 217 proceedings, they are indexed, and it was more than enjoyable to see that you can access them directly from your application. Other institutions are also indexing, and but this is a bit of a tricky part with Thomson Reuters. It's like Amazon and Google, a bit of a black box. You input data, and hopefully they will respond, or will say, well, there are hyphens in your ISBN. We are not using hyphens, and maybe you should rework the publication. But it's still worth to input the materials here. And on the side of ACADIA, Henry Achten has been very active in this regard. So the materials have been covered since, I think, 2009. And would also advise ACADIA to deliver 2015, 16, and 17 to Thomson Reuters, and eventually write an email and another one. The sooner or the later, this will be indexed because you are already in. Now, hopefully you are interested and say, well, what can I do for ACADIA, instead of saying, what can ACADIA do for you? There is a so-called OAI interface. That means you are invited to build up your own applications, to access the data, for example, to update a citation analysis. This is already a couple of years older. The number one citation is Bill Mitchell, which does not surprise. I checked this morning. In the meanwhile, he has already passed the border of far over thousands of citations, a limited number of self-citations. Number 2 is John Giro. He is a bit stronger in the area of self-citation. Number 3 is George Steiny, Richard Korn, Mary Lou Mayer, and also Chuck Eastman, highly cited. So this is also an area which we will be expanding in the near future, so that you yourself, for example, when it comes to tenure and so on, you can show who has been citing my work. There are also other services who are doing this, but they are business driven, and that's not the case here. There's no business behind it, and that's why it's been for such a long time around. This is the very last slides. We have seen that there has been a strong interest for digital fabrication and methods of data mining. Ontology allow also to take far more to the surface. So the message is archiving is important and good, and we've been doing it all together with all the associations for quite some time, but it would be very useful to bring up more to the surface again. And the time says 00, so before the light is being switched off, I thank for your attention, and for the ladies, I'm not Doc Martens from the shoe, so I cannot serve you at this time. That's someone else. Thank you.